There's a moment that, it comes for every single one of us. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've accomplished.
Right.
It's that moment the breath stops, the heart goes silent, and everything you've chased, everything you've built, it just ends.
It's the great equalizer, the ultimate non-negotiable barrier in the human experience.
And that's exactly where our source material for this deep dive begins. It looks right at that finality, that silence.
It does. It starts in the graveyard, so to speak. It's framed as an expose, a hidden truth, and it opens by acknowledging that haunting reality.
But then, and this is the hook, it immediately asks this huge question. What if that's not really the end?
What if it's not the final word?
Exactly. What if the authority over that final stop sign belongs to someone totally unexpected?
And that's the core thesis, isn't it? The source dives deep into life, death, resurrection, but through a very, very personal lens. It's all stories, all theology.
So our mission today for you, the learner, is to really unpack that. We want to get past the idea of just some historical miracle. We need to focus on the specific claims the text makes about who holds the keys to life and what resurrection even means.
Not just for the physically dead, but for us, when we feel buried by life.
Yes, that metaphorical death.
And that's where this radical redefinition comes in. The text argues that resurrection isn't an event.
It's a person.
It's a person. And it claims that if you can make that one shift from a what to a who, it changes everything. It moves from a future hope to a present reality.
And to prove this, the entire text pivots on one story, a story that's less about just saving a life and more about establishing this incredible authority.
The story of Lazarus.
Dead for 4 days.
Dead for 4 days. That detail is everything.
Okay, so let's set the stage for that. Section 1 is really about what the source calls the preview of defeat and decay.
Yes, because the concept of resurrection is meaningless if you don't first establish the absolute, undeniable reality of death.
You have to feel the weight of the defeat first.
You have to. The source hammers this home. Everything you build, everything you earn, it all ends at that moment.
Yeah.
And to understand who holds the keys, you first have to stare at the locked door.
Which is why the Lazarus story works so perfectly. The source presents it as this almost cinematic preview of death being completely undone.
And the timing is so important. The fact that this happens before Jesus' own death.
It's a demonstration, like a dress rehearsal for the main event.
A dress rehearsal with very permanent consequences. And the demonstration had to be totally undeniable.
Right, because people could explain away so much. Oh, he just fainted or he was in a coma.
Exactly. But the source is so specific, it gives this one concrete, unspinnable detail.
Lazarus was dead for 4 days.
4 days. And we have to pause there because that number isn't random. It's not just a medical detail. For the audience of this text, it's a profound theological and cultural statement.
Can you unpack that for us, the significance of the 4th day?
Absolutely. So, in Jewish tradition at the time, there was a belief that the soul, the nephesh, would linger near the body for about 3 days.
Sort of hoping to get back in?
In a manner of speaking, yes. So anything that happened within those first 72 hours could potentially be explained away. A deep trance, a sudden recovery. It was within the realm of possibility, however remote.
But day 4 was different.
Day 4 was the point of no return. It signaled the definitive departure of the soul. But more than that, it signaled the beginning of physical decay, of corruption.
The body itself starts to break down.
Yes. Martha even says it in the story, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. She's not just being emotional, she's stating a biological fact. Corruption has set in.
So by waiting until the 4th day, the text is drawing a line in the sand. This isn't a resuscitation.
It can't be. It's a recreation of life where decay was already established.
Yeah.
And the text paints this picture of total defeat. His sisters are described as broken.
The whole town is mourning.
And crucially, the text says hope was gone. This wasn't a vigil for a sick man. It was a funeral for a dead one. The defeat was complete, public, and documented.
The source material is basically saying, look at this. Look at the absolute finality of it. Smell the decay. This is the barrier.
That defeat is necessary. Because if death had only been defeated when it was, fresh, the lesson wouldn't be as powerful. But death that has settled in, that has started to corrupt.
That is the final word that the text claims is about to be overturned.
And that leads right to the narrative's central puzzle, what the source calls the central mystery of timing.
Why wait?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he loved Lazarus, if he cared about Mary and Martha, why not rush to his side when he was sick? Why let him die at all, let alone wait until the 4th day?
The source frames this as a deliberate, profound mystery. Because if the goal was just to be a good friend or to perform a healing,
speed would have been everything.
Right, but the text suggests the delay was essential. The point of irreversible decay, the point where human intervention becomes completely meaningless.
That's the exact moment chosen for the divine intervention.
It's an incredible narrative strategy. You have to let the audience see death fully established, fully rotting, for the reversal to have its full impact.
The waiting maximizes the defeat before it maximizes the demonstration of power. And the text builds this massive curiosity by saying the answer to why he waited changes everything about how we see life.
And it suggests the power on display isn't just over the state of being dead.
No, it's over the ultimate consequence of death, which is decay, corruption, the physical breakdown. If he had shown up on day 2, it's a powerful healing.
But day 4?
Day 4 is a statement of authority over the laws of biology itself. Only the one holding the ultimate key could reverse that level of finality.
Which brings us to the claim itself, the radical statement of identity in John 11:25. Jesus finally arrives, sees this scene of total 4-day-old defeat, and he doesn't offer a prayer or a ritual.
No. He makes this breathtaking self-referential claim. He says, I am the resurrection and the life.
And the source material argues that this specific linguistic choice is the absolute core of its entire theological framework.
It is. We have to really drill down into this. The text points out, he didn't say, I bring resurrection.
Or I can cause resurrection.
Or even, I'm a channel for resurrection. He uses the present tense, the state of being. He says, I am resurrection.
That distinction changes the entire mechanic, doesn't it? If resurrection is an action, a verb, then it's an event. It can happen, it can fail, it can be a one-off.
Exactly. It's temporal, conditional.
But if resurrection is a person, a proper noun, an intrinsic part of who he is, then it's always present, it's constant, it's something you connect to, not something you wait for.
And we have to look at the phrase, I am. In the original Greek, it's ego eimi. For the original audience, this isn't just casual conversation.
It's an echo.
It's a direct, unmistakable theological echo of the Old Testament. It's the same phrase God uses to name himself to Moses at the burning bush in Exodus. I am, to which you I am.
So the text is arguing that by using this phrase, Jesus is claiming that same divine identity.
Precisely. The quality of resurrection isn't something external that he possesses, like a tool in a toolbox. It's inherent to his nature. He's saying, to be in my presence is to be in the presence of resurrection itself.
It just collapses the distance between the power and the person.
It does. When resurrection is an event, you're always waiting. You're waiting for some future moment after you die, or maybe after you hit rock bottom.
But if it's a person,
then the presence of that person is the mechanism for reversing decay. It's available right now. The implication is, if you want life, you don't chase the miracle.
You connect to the person.
That's the shift. It's a massive shift in focus from what happens to who is present.
And if that's true, if resurrection is an identity, then it has to be more than just a story from 2,000 years ago.
It has to be. Otherwise, what's the point? It has to be something that applies now to us.
Which is the perfect transition to section 2, beyond the tomb. This is where the source text makes that crucial leap from physical death.
Which, thankfully, most of us aren't dealing with at this exact moment.
Right. It leaps from that to the metaphorical death that we all experience, the internal stuff.
And this is where it becomes immediately applicable to you, the learner, the person who's facing, burnout or a major loss or just feels completely stuck.
What does that kind of death look like? It's not the literal grave. It's that feeling of being paralyzed, stalled, buried by your circumstances.
The source defines it as the complete shutdown of hope, the shutdown of potential, of your will to even keep trying.
And to make this connection, the source provides this incredibly powerful, specific story about a man named Daniel.
This is Daniel's Lazarus moment.
And the losses he faced were they were catastrophic. And it's the compounded nature of them that's so important. It all happened in 1 year.
One brutal year. His marriage collapsed.
He lost his job.
He developed severe health problems.
And then the text says, even his will to live was gone.
That combination, that's the theological equivalent of being dead for 4 days. It's not one setback you can bounce back from. It's a total system failure. Every pillar of his life gone at once.
The source really wants us to feel the weight of that. It describes his despair in such stark terms. He'd pray, and it says, heaven felt silent.
That feeling of being completely buried by life, not just in a hole, but with the dirt packed on top, unable to even see the light.
And the text points out his trajectory. First, he fought. He tried to fix the marriage. He tried to find a new job. He tried to manage the health issues.
The human response. We fight. We strive.
But he eventually hit that point of complete surrender, the point where his own energy, his own resources were just gone. Just like Lazarus's body had reached the point of irreversible decay.
And the text captures that moment of surrender so perfectly in his prayer. It says he just whispered it.
God, if there's any life left in me, you'll have to speak it.
And that's it. That is the pivot point the entire source celebrates. It's the recognition that life has to come from an external authoritative source.
Because the internal source is empty, it's failed.
Exactly. He wasn't demanding a quick fix. He was surrendering his own ability to fight, just handing the whole mess over to the one who holds the key.
Which brings us to the core insight from Daniel's story, and it reinforces our central theme. God rebuilt him. But it was slow, and it was painful.
And crucially, it wasn't because Daniel suddenly found some inner strength. It wasn't a pull yourself up by your bootstraps moment.
It was because, as the text states, resurrection is not an event, but a person.
The contrast in speed between the two stories is so telling. Lazarus being called out of the tomb, that's an event. It's instantaneous, a shock to the system.
But Daniel's story, his rebuilding was slowly, painfully.
Which suggests that when the person who is resurrection is applied to a ruined life, it's not always a lightning strike. It's a long, sustained process. It's construction work, not magic.
So the source is actually redefining what the miracle is. The miracle isn't the instant removal of the problem.
The miracle is the sustained presence that makes the slow, painful process of rebuilding possible when you have no strength left of your own.
Daniel was resurrected over years, Lazarus in a moment, but the source of the life-giving command, the text argues, was identical.
And it connects the two stories seamlessly. It draws a straight line from the God who spoke a command and brought Lazarus out of a physical tomb,
defying corruption,
to the one who, through a sustained presence, called Daniel out of his metaphorical grave of despair and total collapse.
In both cases, the power was the same. The ability to speak life into a place that was demonstrably, definitively dead.
One was instant and external, the other was internal and prolonged. But the authority to reverse that 4-day limit of despair, that remained constant.
Okay, but if we accept that resurrection is this active, ongoing presence, how does that actually work? I mean, how do you bridge the gap between a 2,000-year-old story and my very real anxiety about my job right now?
That's the right question. There has to be a mechanism. And the text provides it by shifting the conversation to one of jurisdiction, of authority.
Which brings us to section 3, authority over death and failure. The text claims the secret isn't about avoiding failure because you can't.
You can't, it's inevitable.
It's about knowing who holds the keys to it.
And that shift is everything. It moves the focus from protection to authority. We spend so much energy trying to build walls to protect ourselves from failure, from loss, from death.
But the text says true victory isn't in the strength of your walls. It's in knowing who has the master key to the whole prison.
This is what the source calls the secret exposed. And it's very specific about where this authority is located, quoting directly from Revelation 1:18.
Where the figure of Jesus says, I have the keys of death and hell.
That is a definitive statement of jurisdiction. Keys symbolize authority, access, control. If you have the keys, you decide who gets in, and more importantly, who gets out.
It's a final veto over finality.
Exactly. And if the person whose resurrection holds those keys, then it means anything else that tries to claim final authority over your life. It's acting without jurisdiction.
It's a pretender to the throne.
That's the logical conclusion the text forces you into. It argues that so much of our despair comes from handing the keys over to things that don't actually own them. We let our mistakes define us.
And this is maybe the most practical, applicable part of the entire deep dive. The text then lists the specific things that do not hold the key.
This list is aimed right at the heart of our modern struggles. We have to go through it in detail.
Let's do it. First on the list, your past doesn't have the key.
Now, that's not saying your past wasn't real or that trauma didn't happen. It's a jurisdictional claim. It's saying the memory, the shame, the historical fact of what happened then does not possess the final legal authority to determine what happens now.
We tend to treat our past like a life sentence, don't we?
Right.
We let some old mistake or some old wound define the absolute limits of our future.
We let the grave of yesterday dictate the landscape of today. The source is saying no. Whatever happened back there has no permanent authority because the key that unlocks your future belongs to someone else.
It's a huge cognitive reframe. The past only keeps you locked in if you agree to let it be the warden.
Okay, next on the list. Your mistakes don't have the key. This is more specific than the past. These are the actions, the errors in judgment.
The thing you did that you wish you could take back.
Right, and we let the gravity of a single huge mistake, a failed business, a broken relationship, just bury us. We decide we're done. The text says that mistake doesn't have the power to permanently lock the door on new attempts.
It recontextualizes failure. If your mistakes held the key, one big failure would mean you're out of the game forever.
But the source argues failure is only a temporary condition because the authority over what's final is held by the person, not by your performance.
But I have to ask, if the mistake doesn't hold the key, why does it feel so final? The source has to address that feeling.
It does, implicitly. The feeling persists because we haven't actually acknowledged the true key holder. We're still acting as if our own perfect performance was supposed to be the key, and since we failed, we think the door is locked for good.
That brings us to the third one, which is maybe the most sensitive. Your depression doesn't have the key.
This is so important. Depression can feel like a deep spiritual death. It's that total loss of the will to live that Daniel felt. That numbness is the metaphorical corruption, the 4-day decay.
And the source is making a theological claim here, not a clinical one. It is not dismissing the reality of mental illness.
Not at all. It's saying that this internal state, as overwhelming and as real as it is ultimately subservient to that higher authority. It may feel like a tune, dark and silent, but the text declares it's not the warden. It doesn't have the keys to make the sentence permanent.
So the hope it offers isn't that the condition magically vanishes, but that the ultimate outcome of that condition isn't determined by the condition itself.
Exactly. The final authority lies externally in the person who is resurrection. That's what allows for the possibility of movement, even when your internal engine is completely stalled.
And the last one on the list, your failures don't have the key. This kind of wraps up the others.
It does. It covers the bigger picture. A failed career path, a pattern of failed relationships. It's telling you to see that whole narrative not as a conclusion, but as a chapter.
Because the mechanism for starting a new chapter is external to those circumstances.
The 4-day limit on your career, your relationships, your mental health, it's all negotiable by the key holder. The surrender it talks about isn't giving up on the future. It's giving up on your own finite strength to create that future.
This all naturally leads to the big application question for the listener. If Jesus is resurrection, if he holds the keys,
then what is he trying to resurrect in you right now?
And the source gets very specific, listing these categories of metaphorical death. Is it a dream you buried? A calling you gave up on?
Is it your faith itself that's grown cold and feels dead? Your identity? Your heart?
Let's break those down. A buried dream. Maybe it's a creative project you started, and it got crushed by criticism or just failed to launch.
And you put it in a tomb and rolled a stone in front of it. The source suggests the only thing keeping it buried is your refusal to hand over the keys to its outcome.
What about identity?
I think that's the sense of self you lose in the middle of all the failure and depression. You start to define yourself by your losses. I am a failure. I am a disappointment.
You let the past hold the key to who you are.
And the text argues that the definition of who you are is not owned by your track record. It's owned by the one who speaks life.
And then faith or heart. Those are the core systems, aren't they? A dead heart means numbness, the inability to connect, to feel.
A resurrection there would mean the slow, painful return of the ability to trust, to love, to feel again. That's the Daniel-style resurrection.
Yeah.
The long, slow rebuild.
This is really the heart of the argument then, that resurrection isn't a memory from a history book.
It's an ongoing action.
Yeah.
It didn't stop with Lazarus or the empty tomb. The source says it is still happening in anyone who allows life to be spoken into their dead places.
So it's a process. And if it's a process, it requires our participation, our continuous invitation.
The authority that called Lazarus from that tomb is, according to this text, continuously available to call us out of our current darkness.
Okay, so as we move into the final section, the source circles back to that original audacious promise from John 11.25.
It does. It revisits the second half of that statement, framing it as the most overlooked promise.
Let's hear the full statement again.
I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die.
And the source just wants us to sit with the sheer shock of that second sentence. You will live, even though you die.
It's a complete reversal of the fundamental human condition we started this whole deep dive with, that universal moment of cessation.
This promise says that even though your body stops, the essential you doesn't. It's the ultimate defiance.
It creates this kind of two-tier system of life. There's biological life, which is temporary and subject to decay, the 4-day limit.
And then there's this other existence, which is linked to an eternal, non-decaying source.
The person. The source argues that if you're connected to the source of life itself, then the end of the container doesn't mean the end of the contents.
And this is where the source makes a claim. It says, most people miss. It provides the boundary condition. It says life doesn't stop at the grave.
Life only stops where Jesus isn't invited.
That's a huge statement.
It's massive.
Wow.
It places the responsibility for that continuity squarely on our shoulders. It's about agency and invitation. The source is suggesting the ultimate authority, the key holder, will not force the door open.
You have to extend the invitation. If you hold on to the keys yourself, then the separation is maintained.
It shifts the finality away from the external event of death and onto the internal choice of invitation.
Which sets up the final contrast the text wants to make, the comparison between calling versus fighting.
Yes, it speaks directly to the person who is in that season of metaphorical death right now. Your life is falling apart, hope is gone, you feel completely buried.
What's the natural human response in that situation?
To fight, to struggle,
Yeah.
to redouble your efforts, try to fix it all through sheer willpower. You try to perform CPR on the dead thing in your life.
And the source argues that your own strength, your fighting, will always hit a 4-day limit. It will always run out.
But then it pulls us back to the central story one last time. Lazarus was not raised because he fought.
How could he? He was dead.
He was dead. He was raised because Jesus called.
That's a complete reversal of the dynamic. Fighting is all about our internal effort. It originates with us.
But being called requires only one thing: reception. Lazarus couldn't do anything but hear the external command. The power was 100% external.
So the text concludes with this path, the path of surrender. The great secret isn't about being strong enough.
It's about being weak enough to admit you're not. It's about surrender.
And it defines surrender in a very specific way, letting Jesus speak into the places you've given up on.
It's that moment of acknowledging that your own efforts have failed. Your fighting has reached its limit. You have to hand over jurisdiction.
It's the ultimate act of letting go, admitting that your past, your mistakes, your depression, all the things you've been fighting to control are beyond your power to fix.
You're metaphorically handing the keys back to the one the text claims already owns them. You're acknowledging that the final authority rests in the person, not in your performance.
And the final definitive statement from the text, the one that echoes that opening barrier we talked about.
The grave doesn't get the final word. Jesus does. It's a conclusion focused entirely and completely on jurisdiction.
Wow. That's an incredibly dense and layered reading of that text. To just try and summarize for you, the learner.
A lot to take in.
It is. We started with this radical definition of resurrection as a person, not an event, which shifts it from history to a present-day reality.
Then we look at the mystery of that 4-day delay, suggesting the text needed to show visible corruption to prove the authority over irreversible decay.
And crucially, we detailed those claims about who really holds the keys. The argument that your past, your depression, your failures, they don't have the final say.
The core argument is that shift, isn't it? Moving from seeing resurrection as this one-time miracle to seeing it as a continuous personal process.
A process that is activated by an external call and demands surrender from us, not strength.
It's about letting the authority of the I am define your reality, instead of letting the reality of your defeats define your identity.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. We spent a lot of time on what the text says doesn't hold the keys.
Right. Your history, your failures.
But the whole thing is framed as a jurisdictional battle. If the person who is resurrection holds the keys externally, the only way failure can actually defeat you is if you, internally, keep acting like you're the key holder.
If you refuse to hand them over.
So here's the thought. What internal key, what limiting belief about yourself, what narrative are you currently holding on to so tightly that you refuse to surrender it?
What part of your life have you already declared dead and put a 4-day limit on, even though the source claims that limit has been overcome by a higher authority?
The text says action comes from being called. What does it actually require from you to hear that call? To hear that whisper of life into a place you've already given up on?
It requires attention, doesn't it? A deliberate choice to listen to a different voice, and maybe the painful admission of your own limits.
A truly fascinating and substantial deep dive. Thank you for providing us with such a rich text to explore.
It was a pleasure. A lot to think about there.